So for the last couple of months, I've been listening to a lot of new albums, and I try to always listen to albums from underground artists. And by that, I mean artists that are under 1 million monthly listener. I took albums from artists that had around 500k monthly listener, but it goes down to 500 monthly listeners. I listened to about 40 to 50 albums, and I chose a selection of 15 albums that I want to share with you. During the process of listening to these albums, I took notes on how these albums sound like, and I kind of tried to describe how the album sounds like and what vibe it has. And if I found a meaning behind the album, why it was produced, or if there any backstory, then it's also included. From every album, I'm gonna take a sample listen, which is gonna play right here, and it kind of describes what the album is like. Obviously, an album is very diverse, but I try to take the tracks that I personally like the most and which describes the album the best. So let's start with the first album, that's Friends by James K. The album has a dreamlike retrofuturistic vibe to it, and that is because the artist plays a lot with hazy synths and guitars that are layered. The genre of this album can be best described as dream pop, and what makes it so special for me personally is the rhythm. It goes from down-tempo to EDM moments to breakbeats, and there are also some jungle sections. One thing I also note down, that her voice is always drifting through the tracks like an instrument. The album plays a lot with tempo and texture, which makes it so special because it's not sticking to the normal pop structures. Here's a sample listen. The next album I chose was Perfect by Immaterialize. The album was recorded at home with a DIY approach, which gives it a very personal and intimate feeling. Instead of big pop hooks, it focuses more on the feeling itself and the mood. The album explores memory, identity, or longing. It's the kind of album you listen to alone with your headphones and just dissociate from everything else. The album builds on a gentle guitar sound and minimalistic rhythms. Here's a sample listen.
Normal 913 Cheesecake Factory.
The next album I chose was Nothing Is Still by Vynehall. This album was actually his debut full-length album, and instead of making club records as he did before, he makes something way more emotional and personal. The album tells the story of his grandparents, which immigrated from the UK to New York in the 1960s. The music reflects their trip and their memories together, and this is exactly why it has this feeling of being a soundtrack to a memory or a film. Leon dug into old photos and memories of his grandparents, especially after they passed away. That sparked conversation about their past and eventually became an album of documenting their journey. And that's exactly what it feels like. It's slow, it's emotional, and it's beautiful. Here's a sample listen. The next album I chose is actually one of my favorite albums on this list. It's disku by disku. This album is a total cultural fusion. It's part world music, part disco, part house, which gives it this contemporary and timeless feeling. It feels like a trip across different places and times, from Egyptian folk to Turkish psychedelia to Algerian rai and Kalish disco, but always with a modern production, which makes it feel like you can dance to it today. It's perfect for people who love dance music with a cultural flair and a lot of personality. Here's a sample listen. The next album is a compilation of rare and historic Venezuelan music from the 1960s and 1970s. The album is called Color de Trópico, and it has some really hard to find songs in it that released between 1966 and 1978. Rather than being music created by one artist, it's actually a selection of Venezuelan gems that would have been lost. The interesting part of this album is it shows the variety of this period. Here's the sample song of this album. The next album is from an artist duo that have more than 1 million monthly listeners. But I still wanted to include this album because I feel like a lot of people do not know this album, and for me it's one of my favorite albums of all time. And that is Años by Hermanos Gutiérrez. There are no vocals in this album, but it doesn't really need to have any vocals because the leading guitar does all of the expressions. It's Latin American folk and it has this desert western atmosphere with a 1950s, 1960s influence. It feels like a cinematic journey through landscape and emotions. As I said before, there are no vocals, it's just guitar and light percussions. Here's a sample song of this album. The next album is No Time for Sorrows by Fabienne delsol. It sounds like a modern take on 1960s pop and garage music. It's kind of like walking into a 60s pop club that got transported to the 2000s. It has simple drum beats, jangly guitar, light organs, and melodies that stick without being flashy. Here's a sample song of this album.
Tu ne l'auras pas volé. Laisse tomber les filles, laisse tomber les filles. Un jour c'est toi qu'on laissera. Laisse tomber les filles, laisse tomber les filles. Un jour c'est toi qui pleuras. Non, pour te plaindre il y aura.
Now we have Propaganda by Propaganda featuring Thunder. This album is so special because it's a self-titled comeback album after nearly 20 years. Propaganda is celebrated for pushing synth pop into cinematic high art direction in the 1980s. Their music still resonates in modern synth, electronic and dark pop cycles. It reimagines an iconic band for today's electronic music, helped with Thunder Bass' distinctive vocals. Here's a sample listen.
Forever, forever. They call me nocivo.
The next album is You Win Again by Spivak. It's a short, dreamy electronic album. It has 9 tracks and it's about 25 minutes of music. It blends indie synth pop, hazy electronic textures, and spaced out rhythms which give it its dreamy or lo-fi feeling. Here's the sample song of this album. Now we come to the next album, that is Spell #6 by Part-Time. The genre that best describes this album would be nostalgia pop, because the whole album feels like you're listening to a cassette tune from the 80s. The album draws heavily on the 80s production and songcraft. Sample listen. The next album is Elapsed by Lipsticism. It's a short electronic pop album blending dreamy, experimental, and kind of nostalgia elements. It's personal without being too direct. It's a sort of album that works both for focused listening and chilling or reflecting, creating music that can feel both introspective and danceable. Here's a sample song of this album. The last album I chose was Greatest Hits by JT. This again is a compilation album from JT's most popular and representative songs. The best way to describe it is that it blends disco-ready sounds with electronic elements. Sample listen.
And I know you're too heavy for my heart. I know my love takes.
So these are all the albums I wanted to share with you. I chose albums that have different sounds in different languages, especially for that reason, to expand your music taste. All of these artists mentioned deserve way more recognition than they have right now. I did a playlist including all of these songs, and you can access this either over here, or I'm also gonna put the link to the playlist into the description.